Hello students, it's Pokemon Professor Maple here, and today we're going to explore the question of can we reverse the starter types? Right at the start, I should probably define what I even mean by this. Fire is super effective against grass, which is more effective than grass against fire. Thus we could say that fire has a good matchup against grass, and the same could be said against grass to water and water to fire. Pokemon often gain a second type upon evolving, so I wondered if it was possible for the starters to receive second types such that all three of those matchups went backwards. The reason I was interested in this is that far too often when I see a youngster that gets a starter with a good matchup versus their friends and rival starters, they would neglect training any other Pokemon. If they knew for certain that those type matchups would flip in the future, they would be encouraged to build a better team. Let's start with the original trio. First we should pick a second type for the fire starter that helps it resist the water starter. Those types would be water, grass, and dragon. Grass and water are already being used by the other starters, so I suppose we'll pick dragon. Dragon is neutral against water, while also resisting attacks from grass and water. However, this only makes the matchup between the fire and water starters neutral. This means that the fire dragon starter would have to be super effective against the water starter. Fire cannot possibly be super effective, because even if water's secondary type was weak to fire, fire would only do neutral damage. And the only way dragon could be super effective is if the water type was also a dragon. Which means the water starter is still super effective against the fire starter, and oh dear, this is all a big mess. Let's just start again. If we can't make the fire starter neutral to the water starter, we can at least make it doubly super effective against it. If we had electric to the fire starter and flying to the water starter, the fire starter is now 4 times effective against the water starter, whereas the water starter is only 2 times effective. This is a good matchup for the fire starter, and also helps flip the water-grass matchup around. All we need to do is pick a second type for the grass starter that helps with the grass-fire matchup, without messing up the others, and we're done. Let's get grass a type that's super effective against the fire-electric starter. Those would be water, ground, and rock. We can't use water because that's already being used by one of the other starters, and we can't use rock because that would mess up the relationship with the water-flying starter. So I suppose we'll pick ground. Ground doesn't resist fire, however is 4 times effective against the fire-electric starter, so the grass starter still has a good matchup. So we did succeed in reversing the starter types, but this isn't a very symmetrical answer. Let's see if we can do better. If you recall from my previous video, there are a bunch of symmetrical starter options. Let's see if we can reverse any of those instead. For example, if we have Fighting Rock Flying, they are super effective going clockwise, and resisted going counterclockwise. If we had Electric to the Fighting type starter, Psychic to the Rock type starter, and Steel to the Flying type starter, then all the attacks going clockwise only do neutral damage, whereas the attacks going counterclockwise do super effective damage. This flips all the matchups such that each starter now has a good matchup against the one counterclockwise of it. This is a pretty good one, because both the attacks and the defenses are symmetrical before and after the second types are added. Let's see what other combinations share this relationship. If we started with grass, rock, ice, we could add fire, flying, and ground to reverse the matchups. We can also do the same relationship with dragon instead of flying, and if we do that, we can replace ice's ground type with fighting. These 4 type combinations are the only ones that have symmetry both before and after the second types are added. Let's expand those search to types that are super effective going clockwise before the second type is added, and super effective going counterclockwise after the second type is added, and we'll just not worry about the defenses. For example, starting with Grass, Ground, Poison, we could add Rock, Bug, Flying to reverse the matchups. This one is no longer quite as symmetrical, as the Poison Flying starter double resists the Ground Bug starter, as opposed to being neutral to it, but it's still pretty good. We could also start with Grass, Rock, Flying. This one wasn't perfectly symmetrical before the second types are added, but if we add Electric, Fire, and Fighting, it is now symmetrical, and the matchups now go the other way. We could also replace the Fire and Fighting with Poison and Steel, or Bug and Steel. Now there's a handful of other combinations that I'll just rattle off quickly. Starting from Grass, Rock, Bug, we could add Fire Dragon Fighting, Fire Dragon Ground, and Flying Dragon Ground. Starting from Ice Flying Fighting, we could add Fairy Fire Electric, Psychic Fire Electric, and Psychic Steel Electric. And lastly, starting from Fighting Steel Fairy, we could add Poison Flying Electric or Poison Flying Fire. These are all the typings fitting the criteria we looked for earlier. We have quite a few of them, so many that I had to remove the header from my slides. But how many of these type combinations actually exist such that professors could give these out to their youngsters? Absolutely none of them. These 4 combinations use Fighting Electric, which as of yet there has been no Pokemon discovered that has that combination. These 5 use Grass Fire, and this one over here uses Fairy Fire. This leaves us with just 6 combinations, but at least they are made up of only types of Pokemon that have been discovered. However, we're going to have to look a little closer. For example, take Poison Flying from this set. There has been a Poison Flying Pokemon that has been discovered. It's Crobat. However, we were looking for a Pokemon that starts out as just Poison, and gains the Flying typing later. Unfortunately, Zubat starts as a Flying type. If we tried to use Zubat for the Grass-Ground Poison combination, this would mess up the relationship with the Ground starter. So we're looking for a Poison type that evolves into a Poison Flying type. And because youngsters are receiving this Pokemon at the beginning of their journey, ideally it should have 3 stages of evolution. So with all that in mind, how many of these type combinations even exist? For a Flying type that evolves into a Flying Steel type, we have Corviknight. For a Flying type that evolves into a Flying Fire type, we have Talonflame. And for a Rock type that evolves into a Rock Fire type, we have Colossal. These are the only ones available. If we were really desperate, we could have a Bug type that evolves into a Bug Ground in Wormadam Sandycloak, but it has other cloaks it could evolve into, and also it's only a 2-stage. So it seems that while we could do the type combinations in theory, we can't do it in practice. So unless the scientists over at Game Freak discover some Pokemon of new type combinations, or something like Vanillish spontaneously developed psychic powers, it looks like all this will remain some crazy dream. That's all for today. Next time I'll be answering the question of what to do if you have more than 3 youngsters needing starter Pokemon.